look through there and we say, okay, where am I in this, right? Have you ever had somebody say, okay, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. How about you put your name in there, right? For God so loved Luke. That's right. For God so loved Luke that he gave his only begotten Son. You see, they tell us to put our name in there, but then we forget to actually take it out. And we forget that it's like, for God so loved the world. Right? It's not just about me. Like the main character in God's story is not me. Right? I know that's hard for some of you to take. And I'm sure we'll have counseling in the back afterwards. But the main character in God's story, it's not you. Right? It's not you. Guess who it is? God, that's right. Yeah, it's God, right? And you know, the other thing that we do in Scripture is we take it and we say, okay, I really like this verse. I'm going to make this verse like my life verse, or I'm going to make this verse my year verse, or in this situation, I'm going to memorize this verse so that I can overcome this temptation. Is there anything wrong with that? No, right? That's the right answer. No, there's nothing wrong with that. But what we do is we forget that when we look at one verse, when we study one book, we forget that God's story, the whole Bible, right? It's one story. This is one story. It's one book, right? Do you understand that? It is one book. It's got one story, one theme runs through the whole thing. Guess what that theme is? Just guess. God? Jesus? Good answer. Right? The theme is living God as a missionary God. Now, lots of times when we talk about missions, now I know this isn't you because this is a missions emphasis, whatever. But lots of times when we talk about missions or when we talk about this, you know, lots of times it's like talking about exercise or eating your vegetables. You know, we know it's a good thing to do, but it's like, man, I just can't get my mind around that. Just like I told you guys, you know, last night, my wife signed me up for that half marathon. I just hate exercise. I hate anything having to do with exercise or anything even looking like exercise. I hate it. Just do. You know, but that's the thing. When we look at missions, we think, oh, exercise, vegetables. I know they're good for me, but I just can't get my mind around that, right? But the fact is, throughout Scripture, the living God is a missionary God, and that's His plan for making a difference. All right? Let's look at this story. First, you have the intro, right? In any story, English people in here, any story, you have what? Huh? Beginning, middle, and end, right? Intro, body, and what? Conclusion, right? Intro is where we meet the main characters, right? Intro is where we see the conflict arise. Any good story has conflict, right? Yeah. Any good story has stuff like, you think about your favorite movies, right? So what are some of your favorite movies? Huh? Who said a real movie over here? Gladiator, Star Wars, that's right, that's what I'm talking about. Finding Nemo, yeah. What did somebody say, Cinderella or some Pocahontas? Yeah, I mean, there's good conflict in there, like Star Wars, Gladiator. What about Braveheart? Yeah, right, that's what I'm talking about. Those are real movies, right? What about, like, The Notebook? I hate The Notebook. Let me say that. That's that right now. Guys like me, The Notebook makes look terrible, right? But we see that in intro, we see the main characters, we see conflict arise. The body, we see those main characters grow, and like Lord of the Rings, right? At the beginning of Lord of the Rings, for those of you who like that, yes. Lord of the Rings at the beginning, we see like the hobbits, they're just like these bumbling idiots, right? By the end, like if you've read the books, anybody read the books? Oh man, they're awesome. Those books are awesome. If you haven't read it, what's wrong with you? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, you've seen the movies, but that's not even comparable. At the end of the books, like Pippin and what's the other guy's name? Merry. Huh? Merry. They come home and they rock the Shire. It's like there's bad guys there and they like clean house totally. In the beginning they're just like idiots. By the end they're warriors. That's what happens in the body. The main characters, they grow and all this stuff happens, and then the conflicts are resolved and all this stuff, and then the conclusion, what happens? It ends. Right? It ends, everything's wrapped up, we see how everything comes together. Well, that's the same thing in Scripture. Right? Same thing. Alright, so let's start with the intro, right? Yeah.
Another good movie would be like Spaceballs.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a different good movie, but yeah, it's still good. All right. So we're gonna start with where should we start? Beginning. Genesis, right? All right. So Genesis 1:28. God has created everything. He's created man and woman, Adam and Eve, and then He says, "And God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." The first commandment, right? First command He gives to people, gives to mankind. It's this physical command with spiritual emphasis, right? The fact is that God created man in His own image. In His image, He created them male and female. And He says, all right, I want you to multiply and I want you to fill the earth. The idea is that the earth would be filled with God's glory, right? And so then what happens? What happens with Adam and Eve? They get kicked out, right? Why? They sin, right? Can you imagine that? I mean, like, they're living in perfection, and God says, all right, the only thing I don't want you to do is I don't want you to eat this apple. You can eat anything else, everything else. Like, for real? Like, what? I mean, like, I like apples, but really? Like, if I never had an apple again, I don't think I'd be sad about that, right? You feel me? Right? All right, and so they're like, oh, we gotta have this apple, right? And, we all understand the implications of sin and temptation and all that stuff. But then they get kicked out, right? And so then mankind, it just begins to grow, and all those other things happen, and then we have the flood, right? Genesis 6:5, the Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart were only evil all the time. All right? But then we have Noah, right? We all know this story. We all know this account, right? We have Noah, and he was a righteous man, and we have, it's funny, I was just talking to Charlie before this. We were talking about the flood and how the most wrathful thing that God has done in human history, what we've done is we've reduced it to splashing all over our nursery walls, right? Isn't that crazy? Like, if you think about that, like, if you're reading Scripture for the very first time, and you're, reading this story about, it's like, what? God is going to kill everybody? God is going to kill men, women, and children. So, if you think about this, as Noah builds the ark, and, that whole thing's even crazy, right? He's out in the middle of nowhere, God says, hey, build a boat, I'm going to bring water. You don't usually do it in that sequence, right? But God says, hey, build a boat, I'm going to kill everybody. If I was reading this for the first time, I think I'd have to set it down. I'd be like, what? Like, I wonder what would happen if somebody was painting a nursery wall and they painted the real scene of the flood. As the rain came down, as the people beat on the side of the ark until their hands were bloody, and they're scratching at the door, and Noah and his family are on the inside saying, we can't open the door. You had your chance, and they're separated by these people who are dying, and they are living, and I wonder how cozy that would be on a nursery wall, right? As mothers clutched their children, and as the waters rose, and as the floodwaters came and just destroyed village after village after village. Makes a good nursery picture, right? All right, so after that, right? Yay! All right, so then what happens? God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. All right, Genesis 9:1, 9:7. As for you, be fruitful. Genesis 10:32. From these the nations spread out over the earth after the flood. All right, this whole idea of be fruitful and multiply, it's repeated numerous times. All right, so that's where we have that. And then what happens? Tower of Babel, right? Then they said, come, let us build ourselves. See, what happens is these guys are, they come out of the ark, and then they're moving across the plains, and they're going, and God says, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. All right, and then it says in Genesis 11:4, then they said, come, let us build a city for ourselves with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. See, the whole idea is God saying, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, and they're saying, hey, we want to make a name for ourselves, right? Which makes you wonder, who are they going to brag to? Everybody's in the same place. But anyway, I don't know. But anyway, they're saying, let's make a name for ourselves. Let's get together. At this point, everybody's speaking the same language, English, and everybody's just going around and you guys didn't catch that, did you? You did. All right, Genesis 11:5-7. God is like, hey, they're just staying there. They're doing this thing. We need to go down and fix this, right? So they go down. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. Out of this, Genesis 11, we have all the nations, all the different languages. You know, could you imagine? Could you imagine if you're standing beside your friend and you guys are building bricks or something, maybe to build this big tower or whatever, you guys are talking about football or who gave a love note to who or what, I don't know, whatever it is you might be talking about at that time, and then all of a sudden you're visiting with them, and all of a sudden they're just talking something you can't even understand. Could you imagine? And I find it interesting. Have you ever been in that situation where everybody's talking a different language and you're just like, I don't know what to do in this situation? My dad, we were flying we flew into LA quite a few years ago. We were going down there for vacation with me and my family, and this is like right after I was married. And we were in the airport. And my dad, you know, I'm from Missouri, not even southern Missouri, but my dad's kind of a good old boy, you know, kind of a big guy. And not really, you know, I went to high school in Brashear, which was, like I said, right around 300 people. So you don't get a whole lot of diversity there, you know. It's basically a couple families, you know. And so my dad, we go down to LA, and there's this guy, he's got a little girl, and he's just talking, you know, and I think it was French he was talking, speaking to his daughter, and they're just going and just a mile, and my dad, like he gets up, and he doesn't really have personal space concept either, and so he's getting up to him like this, and he's looking at him, and he's looking at him, and he's got his little girl there, and he's looking at him, you know, as they're conversing, he's like, and finally he starts laughing, he says, do you think she understands you? You know, and I was like, Dad, you know, I was like, she probably doesn't speak English if he speaks French, you know, it's like this whole concept, but, you know, I don't know, but my dad's a great guy. But anyway, we have these people, and they're standing here, and they're doing this thing, and then all of a sudden, God confuses their language, and they spread out, right? So the Lord scattered them from over all the earth, Genesis 11:8. And out of this, all the nations were made. The chapter before this talks about the different nations and different peoples. And then, you know, the whole idea is, you know, men, we want to gather. We want to gather. But God says, no, I want you to scatter. I want you to fill the earth where we get every ethne. That name, ethne, it's the Greek for the nations. Or if you see Gentiles, there's many places in Scripture where this word is translated in different ways because it can be. All right, so that's the intro. All right, so we move from there to the body. All right? So the intro is we have everything going on, everything scatters, and there's sin and all this stuff going on in the world. And in the beginning of the body, we meet this guy. His name is Abram, right? In the land of Ur. All right? And God comes down to Abram and he says, all right, Abram, I want you to leave your land. I want you to leave your family. I want you to leave everything. And I want you to go to a place that I'm going to show you. Right? Does anybody else find that a little rude? Right? I mean, again, if you're looking at Scripture with fresh eyes, wouldn't this be kind of crazy? Abram, if you think about it, he's about halfway through his life. You know, today, I think the average lifespan today is what, like 78? 80? Say 80? Alright, so halfway through your life would be 40. Alright? So